How about extra or non-Christian sources?
People often ask about non-Christian sources for the Gospels, and I think that behind this question lies a misconception that laymen have about the New Testament that needs to be rooted out first, and that is this, that somehow the New Testament is a single book which is written by Christians and therefore unreliable and not credible. But if there were evidence outside this book, that would be real evidence. That would be credible. And this, I think, is just a complete misconception about what the New Testament originally was. Lay people need to understand that originally there was no such thing as the New Testament. The New Testament wasn't assembled into a single volume until a few hundred years after the death of Jesus. What there were originally was simply separate, independent documents in the Greek language coming down out of the first century. There were Gospels, there were letters, there were histories of the early church, there was an apocalypse. All of these independent documents in the Greek language handed down out of the first century telling this remarkable story of Jesus of Nazareth. And what the church did was it collected together the earliest of these documents, the most reliable of them, and put them under one cover and called it the New Testament. So that by the very nature of the case, our earliest and most reliable sources for the life of Jesus are found in the New Testament. To ask what evidence is there outside the New Testament and to discount the New Testament evidence itself is to prefer later, secondary, derivative sources to the earlier primary sources, which is simply bad historical methodology. So the question that we need to be asking is not what extra biblical sources are there for the life of Jesus, although that's interesting. The real question is, how credible are these documents when we examine them for what they really were? Not inspired holy texts, but simply independent manuscripts handed down to us out of the first century about this man, Jesus of Nazareth. And when we examine them using the ordinary canons of historical inquiry, I think they come away looking pretty good as historical sources for the life of Jesus. And these sources are only confirmed but not contradicted by the extra-biblical sources that exist.